Okay, good evening, everyone. Good to have you join us this evening. Thank you all. And welcome to Brent Council Climate Emergency webinar. To this evening's topic will be how to make your home greener. As you may already be aware, the Council released its climate and ecological emergency strategy earlier this spring, following an extensive consultation with residents such as yourselves. And we know that homes, buildings, and the built environment is one of the main themes of our strategy. And we want to talk to you about some of the areas where things can be done to achieve our objective in this area. This evening you'll be hearing from cabinet members from the council and other expert speakers to talk to you on some specific topics, and you will have opportunities to ask them questions. We ask you to please put your questions in writing in the chat, and we also ask you to limit your questions to the specific areas that the speakers have presented upon. If you have any questions that relate generally to the council or what the council is doing around climate emergency, do write them down, and we will try and answer them either today or we will get back to you on them. We expect that this webinar will last for about 90 minutes, and I will be introducing the speakers as we go along and telling you what the next steps will be. And at the end, we'll be able to round off and see what we have learned today, and we will be happy to share with you the presentations that the speakers have presented today. So, without further ado, if I may, I'd like to introduce introduce Councillor Southwood, the lead member for Housing and Welfare Reform. Councillor Southwood, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Hakeem, and fantastic to be here this evening. Thank you everybody for giving up some of your time to spend the time with us on this session. I think certainly if you're anything like me, I think many of us very committed to reducing our own carbon footprints, and where we live is a critical part of that. But sometimes the bit that can feel really difficult is the, well, what on earth can I do part of it? How do I start? And I really hope this evening helps with that. So I'm Brent's Cabinet Member for Housing and Welfare Reform, and the welfare reform part of that role title has really sort of come to the fore in recent times as we think about fuel poverty, which is of course a consequence often of poorly insulated homes, older homes perhaps that are not as efficient as they could be. And we know that 14% of residents in Brent are experiencing fuel poverty. That's the 4th highest in London, and that is not something that we as a borough are proud of. And we see the really difficult and devastating impacts of that often on people's health and well-being. And no more so really than during the recent pandemic, when we know that residents who were living in cold, in less efficient homes experienced much worse sort of health outcomes through COVID than others did. So this stuff really matters to people's well-being. 42% of emissions in Brent come from housing, which is obviously significant, and therefore having a go practically at what we can do with housing and buildings across the borough could make a huge difference. So this is something that really could shift the dial, as it were, considerably in Brent. This is expensive stuff. So they did some research across London that suggests that to retrofit homes and buildings across London would cost £98 billion. Clearly that's a huge financial challenge. But our response to that challenge has been that we in Brent want to be leading by example and showing what can be done. So in July, we started a couple of pilots retrofitting our own council stock. So for those of you less familiar with Brent's role as a landlord, we manage about 12,000 homes. Many of those homes are older homes, and many of them, sadly, are not particularly efficient homes. So we're running a couple of pilots to see what works in terms of thermal efficient internal and external insulation, for example, windows, and other aspects of energy efficiency. So we'll learn from that. You'll hear also this evening very practically the Brent CO2Go fund, which is £500,000 carbon offset fund, how that can be spent to really make a difference too. And what's most important about that is the decisions about how that money will be spent will be made directly by residents. And Brent's also part of a scheme in West London, which is focused on greening homes. And there's £4.7 million available, £1 million of which will be spent in Brent. So whilst that 98 billion is a really scary number, there are definitely ways in which this agenda can be progressed practically in Brent. The political will is absolutely there. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And local authorities very often are being more ambitious than government nationally on the ground. And it's local authorities, after all, who can make some of this practical stuff a reality and really reduce people's fuel bills and make sure that we are delivering what we have stated, which is our desire to get to net zero carbon. So Hakeem, I will leave it there. I really hope this evening is practical for people. I'm afraid I'm not able to stay for the whole evening, but I'll certainly be watching this back to get some ideas for myself as much as anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Southwood. That was very helpful. A really good introduction to what this session is about, particularly as it relates to housing and particularly around council stuff. So thank you very much for that. If I may now, if I call on Councillor Krupa-Sheff, who is the lead member for the environment at Brent Council, to say a few words of introduction as well.
Thank you very much, Hakeem. Good evening. I'm Councillor Krupa-Sheff. I'm Brent's lead member for the environment at Brent, and I oversee the Brent Climate Emergency Strategy. Following on from Councillor Southwood, I would also like to welcome you all to this session. We have been running these webinars after reflecting on suggestions from our residents that the council needed to take a leadership role in educating people on the biggest crisis we are facing and to provide practical takeaway tips for residents to take action themselves. As I'm sure you'll be aware, we are into the crucial second week of the Conference of the Parties COP26, International Climate Change Conference, which the UK is hosting in Glasgow. This year's critical UN conference is where world leaders, delegates, businesses, NGOs, and community organizations have come together from all countries to agree on the urgent action which needs to be taken to tackle climate change. To provide a bit of context, under the Paris Agreement made at Conference of the Parties COP21, countries agreed to limit global warming to well below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 6 years on, and the window for action has narrowed. During COP26, parties will come together to review the last major commitment agreed. Countries are being asked to come forward with ambitious targets to reach net zero and reduce carbon emissions by 2030. It has been thought that 2021 is a significant year to confront the global climate emergency, as the window of opportunity to remain under 1.5 degrees Celsius is diminishing. In July 2019, Brent declared a climate and ecological emergency and pledged to do all in our gift to achieve carbon neutrality in the borough by 2030. Homes, buildings, and the built environment is the third key theme in the climate emergency strategy, which was set following the Brent Climate Assembly, which also took place later on in 2019. The Brent Climate Festival, which is taking place right now during COP26, is an opportunity to engage and educate the local community on this crucial subject of global and local climate and ecological issues. We want to take this opportunity to empower people to take the necessary steps to tackle climate change in Brent. In Brent, we're at the forefront of trying to facilitate real change in local areas for local people, which will go a significant way to reduce both the direct emissions which take place within our boundary and indirectly through consumption emissions attributed to our residents. For radical change to happen, we all need to take action. I hope this webinar will give you a better understanding of simple changes which can be made in and around your home in your day-to-day lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chef. So just thank you for talking to us about the relationship between this seminar and COP26, something we've been hearing a lot about, and the desire globally to reduce carbon emissions. But that relates directly to what we want to do in Brent, to achieve net zero carbon, and particularly wanting to encourage residents to make the right steps for us to achieve this objective. So thank you very much for that. Now, if I may, now call on Chris Newman from Parity Projects. Chris is the Commercial Director at Parity Projects. Chris, please.
Cool, thanks, Hakeem. I'm going to show you a quick presentation as well as speaking. So hopefully the screen is shared okay. So just, I'm Chris Newman. Parity Projects is a small private company based in London, but we punch well above our weight. We look specifically at domestic properties, so we don't do anything on commercial, and we've been looking at how to improve those properties from a climate and a CO2 and energy point of view for about 15 years. I'm quickly going to show you a demonstration project, which is actually the house I'm in, which we did 10 years ago, and to give you some sort of information on how to hang some of the other bits on that you'll hear today. So to put it into reality, and everyone liked a few pictures as well. I will then show you some highlights of some analysis we've done for Brent, who was part of a bigger piece we did for the whole of London. And then I'll explain a little bit about heat pumps, because you're probably hearing a lot more about those, or will hear a lot more, and just explain what they can mean, because they're going to play a big piece in the future. Right. So this is just a slide to highlight that every home is different. So I'm not going to be able to tell you, or nobody's going to tell you, here's what you need to do to your home, without actually being able to understand about you and your home. Even all the properties in a Victorian terrace streets have changed over time. So they'll all need different things, and there's no right answer. Here's my property. It's not quite a terrace. It was built in 1875. I call it a semi detached because it was a bit attached over on this left hand side when you look at the front. Solid walls, a difficult alley, rubbish insulation. Actually had storage heaters, although it's in London. But it had a gas boiler and gas room fires, and it was all falling apart. So there was a lot needed doing. It's a little tip: if you ever want to do an exemplar project, find one that's in a dire state, so then everything you do looks good. And it had some leaky windows as well. And the back, there you go. Some other bits and pieces. So it hadn't really been touched. There were newspapers under this ground floor which talked about some MPs going to Hitler's birthday party. That's how old some of the carpet was at the bottom. So what was our philosophy back in 2010? Well, we wanted to be cost effective. There were lots of projects out there that scared people and put people off. We wanted to do it as cheaply as possible. We wanted to use readily available materials and systems. So we weren't talking about stuff from Mars. I wanted to do much DIY as possible, partly for the cost, partly to keep my dad busy as well with me. We wanted it just to look like a normal property, nothing too wacky. And we aimed for an 80% carbon dioxide emissions. So we wanted to make sure that anybody could do this really. There were lots of things needed doing to the property anyway. So I'd never included those in the overall cost, because anyone buying this property would have had to do a lot of those, including possibly just, they might have changed the windows, or they might have kept them. So we also had a baby halfway through, a second one just to make the whole project a bit grand designs and get a few tiers going on. So non-standard stuff, well, we put some lots of roof insulation in, could be done DIY, flat roof insulation at the back on the rear return. We actually did external solid wall insulation on the back bit of the property, but all the rest where it had the original brick showing, or like on the front there, we put internal wall insulation in. Underfloor insulation, solid floor insulation. We zoned the heating. As you can see, it's a 3-story property, so that allows us to turn the heating off at different places. And we put photovoltaics, that's for electricity, on the main roof, and we put some other types of solar panels for hot water on the flat roof at the back. So what did we achieve? Well, we got to around 80% carbon reduction. We spent about 100,000, but we did some extensions and all those other bits as well. So I reckon that the marginal extra we did on eco stuff was probably about 35,000. But of that, £10,000 was the PV system, which you could probably get for about 4,500 now. A solar thermal, probably not needed anymore if you're going to do some of the things I'll come on to. The windows, we probably could have retained the windows we had if we really wanted to, but we put sash windows back in. So the main things were really the external wall insulation and the 6,500 for the additional heating. So somewhere around about £12,000, which is not far off what a lot of new kitchens and redecoration would cost. And we've ended up with negative bills. Some of that due to the feed-in tariff that came with the PV at the time. And that's what it looks like now. Obviously, you can do a lot with a nicer sunny day and some better photos, but it does look a lot nicer. So what would we do different, really? So one of the key things that impacts what we do different now is that the grid, the electricity grid has decarbonised a lot since we did this work, a lot due to coal disappearing or almost disappearing, and also large-scale offshore renewables and big solar farms. So that's where it was before. Don't worry about the numbers too much, but it was about half a tonne per kilowatt hour per unit of energy electricity delivered. And actually, it's not quite at this figure now, but it's about 0.16. So you can see it's dropped by almost 2/3, and it's going to continue to decline out to 2050. So what that means is, what would we do now? Well, firstly, I don't think we made any mistakes. At the time, I think we did the right thing, because we put in a gas boiler. And that's because the grid wasn't decarbonised. Gas was still a better option. And also the heat pump market wasn't quite there at the time. So now 10 very successful years later, it's time to switch over. So hopefully that's going to be a reasonably painless process for us. I'll come back to that in a bit. So moving on to the Brent analysis. Sorry, I'm going to have to be pretty quick because of the time limit. So we have processed data on every property in Brent. There's no personal data in there. And we've done this from a mixture of open EPC data that's provided by the government and environment energy data information and ordnance survey data and a lot of algorithms to try and work out what we've got there. And we reckon that here's the sort of this is what is on an EPC, so the energy performance certificate, that there aren't many really high performing properties in Brent, same as anywhere else. And there's a few really badly performing ones, but the vast majority in the middle there somewhere. Lots of what we'd call called D-rated, similar to the energy efficiency things on a fridge. And a lot of that is due to the construction of them. You've got a lot of solid brick properties, so they're the older properties, and they won't be insulated, and they're more difficult to insulate. And then around, what's that, about a quarter are cavity, and a lot of those would have been insulated since they were built, so they're usually performing better. And then there's a few other bits and pieces, but they make up the main bit. And in terms of the heating systems, this is a log scale, which means it sort of squeezes down. So as you can see here, what's that, around 90% are, or maybe more, are boilers, and they'll be gas boilers. And so most of the people on the call will probably have those. And then the rest is made up of storage heaters, often in flats and things, room heaters, so a gas fire, or even portable electric heaters where there isn't any other central heating. Some are on community systems, often blocks are, and then there's a few, these are getting quite small numbers now. As you can see, they sort of disappear into this tiny bracket here. So what needs to happen? Well, a lot. So we did some modelling to say, if we wanted to get everything to what they call net zero, so no emissions, you essentially have to get off gas and off oil and anything else, mainly gas, and onto the electricity, and then allow that, the fact that the grid is decarbonising, to do a lot of what we call the heavy lifting. But in order for those to work properly, you've also got to put in as much decent insulation as possible. So we worked out that it's going to cost, of the figures given earlier, the proportion to Brent is about just under 3.5 billion. And that's not going to be given away in grants. So that's going to have to come from people's savings, mortgage extensions, and some from grants and everything else. And that works out roughly at somewhere between sort of 25 and 26,000 pounds a property over the lifetime of them. Oops, let's go up. But there's quite a spread. So some will be a lot cheaper, some will be more expensive, but there's a sort of a graph showing you the spread of where the cost might be. And this is a chart showing those EPC scores. Instead of by band, it's sort of showing them down by number. And it shows the grey is where it was before, with all the Ds in this big bit here, and all shifting above, up here, a big shift to the right. So a massive improvement in the average EPC score from what the average now of 60, 62, 63, up to about 85. And what's that mean in terms of things that need to be installed? Well, the bulk of that cost is coming in heating and hot water systems, mainly heat pumps, and then insulation measures. Roof insulation is very cheap, that's why it's quite low. And the wall insulation, if you're doing this external wall insulation and internal wall insulation, is a lot more expensive. So to sort of wrap up on this, and obviously just sort of throwing these slides out so I can come back to them in lots of questions, just to sort of give you a bit more information about heat pumps, because that's going to be the one thing you hear more and more about over the next few years. So a heat pump, they use radiators, or can use radiators or underfloor heating, but you can often just either use your existing radiators or sort of put bigger ones in to make it more efficient. Also need a hot water cylinder, so that's one of the practical problem that people need to think about. You have a number of different types of heat pumps. The real main one that will be applicable for Brent in 99.9% of situations will be air source heat pumps. So you take the heat that's just there in the air, even when it's -3, there's heat in the air, and they use electricity to concentrate that heat and put it in your house. And that means they can, it sounds strange, but run at efficiencies of 200 to 500%, because the electricity you're putting in is doing work rather than doing the heat. It's moving the heat and concentrating it. So they're a bit like a fridge or an air conditioning unit running in reverse. So you can install them on lots of buildings. The more insulation you add, the more efficient the heat pump will be, and therefore the lower your bills. If you didn't do anything to the house and you just switch from gas to a heat pump, your bills may well go up. So that's where the more insulation you can do, the better. What are the major barriers? So there's price. They are more expensive. There isn't as much competition from installers in place because there's not enough installers, but it's envisaged that price might come down as more and more of them get installed. There's positioning. As I said, it's like an air conditioning unit that sits outside. So there are rules on where it can be in terms of closeness to other properties. You can put them in, they can be on the ground outside, but if you don't have that, there's some practical considerations there. There's whether your radiators are good enough or whether they need to be slightly made bigger, and where the cylinder could go. There's the tradespeople to do this. It's already hard getting tradespeople to do things, but we need to increase the number of tradespeople who are skilled to install these things. And then at the moment, there aren't all that many carrots or sticks to push people away from their gas boilers. There's a lot of rhetoric, but hopefully coming down the line, there'll be more carrots and sticks. So hopefully that's within 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was very, very interesting. And thank you for sharing your own personal experience, using your own home as an example of what we're all facing in terms of trying to decarbonize our homes. Also, you've gone through an analysis of the properties in Brent, which a lot of our participants will understand and would feel, because they are living in those homes at the moment. And the striking figure of about 25 to 26,000 pounds cost of having to do the work. So thank you for that. Hopefully there will be a lot of questions from participants on that when we come to it later. Okay, so if I may now move on to Carolina Castilla, who is a senior outreach officer at Green Doctors. Carolina, please.
Thank you, Hakeem, and thank you, Chris, as well. A very, very interesting presentation indeed. Good evening, everybody. My name, like Hakeem said, is Carolina Castilla. I'm the Senior Outreach Officer for the Green Doctors team. So we are part of an organization called Grand World London, an environmental organization. For people who is not familiar about our service, the Green Doctors is a team of energy advisors. I'm not an energy advisor myself, and an outreach officer. So if there is a very particular question at the end that I'm not able to respond, I will come back anyway to you through the people in the council. So the service, the Green Doctor, has been running in London for 15 years at the moment. And we work in partnership with London boroughs, housing associations, small organizations to help London residents, and in that case, residents from Brent, so eligible residents from Brent, to stay warm, save money, and improve the energy efficiency at home. We always like to say that we have a holistic approach in how we tackle and we try to tackle fuel poverty. I will talk a little bit in tips on how we can do in our daily basis and what we need to think about in terms of save energy in the house and lower our emissions. And at the end, I will explain what service we provide that is completely free, who will be eligible, and why, you know, people can refer themselves or organization can refer residents to us. And I know, again, it's a lot of information in 10 minutes. The presentation will be shared with all of you. As the councillor mentioned at the beginning, it's important that we understand that people live in fuel poverty. There are a lot of problems, physical and mental health problems behind that. So it's very important. I mean, it's not only about money, it's not as well to take care of our well-being. So if our home is cold and is not properly insulated and ventilated, we can have problems because there are a lot of damp and mold. So this is very important that we take care of. In winter, mostly when, you know, the prices of the energy, more particular in this winter, are very high. People get a lot of stress, and this is not good, you know, generate a lot of stress and anxiety. So if we put these two things together, it's important that we keep our home warm to take care of our physical and our mental health. There are things that we can do, little things that we can do to reduce the cost of keeping warm and to as well reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. To mention some of them, so we can learn easy tips on how we reduce energy in the house, and I will share some of you. We can get smart meters to be on top of our energy usage, and we can install small energy measures in the house. These topics are things that we provide advice to residents as well in our consultations. The councillor mentioned as well, I think she said that Brent has around 43% of the emissions come from house. In UK, generally, the number is 40%, so it's quite high. So we can do our little part to help to lower the emissions. And I'm going to mention some numbers and some money that we can save, but I always say, either if we can afford to pay a little more in our energy bills, we need to be conscious that when we save energy, we are helping the environment and we are helping the future generation as well. So this is very, very important. To start with, it's important to know what is the recommended temperature that we need to have our homes. So we need to, again, to save money and to lower the emissions, but it's important that we live in a comfortable home, and it's very, very good for our health. So what is recommended is to have our home, the thermostat in winter between 18 and 21 degrees. So never below 18, and it's recommended no more than 21 because the energy bills will be very high and sometimes will be as well very negative for the health. I'm going to share some of the tips that the green doctors usually share with the residents for you to understand easy things that we can do to save some money and to lower our emissions. We use a lot the kettle. Unfortunately, the kettle is not a very efficient appliance in the house. If we try only to boil the water that we need and no more, we can save around 9 pounds per year, and we can save around 24 kilograms of CO2. If we lower our thermostat 1 degree, again, never below 18 degrees, we can save around 89 pounds per year and 354 kilograms of CO2. If we replace traditional bulbs with LED bulbs, so that are a little more expensive but save more energy, we can save around 3 pounds per bulb per year and 11 kilograms of CO2. If we be sure that when we wash our dishes, we use a bowl or a tap instead of flushing the tap constantly, we can save around 31 pounds a year and 134 kilograms of CO2. And the last tip is if we use water efficiency shower taps and shower heads, we can save around 23 pounds and 90 kilograms of CO2 and around 40,000 liters of water. So a year, this is quite a lot. Again, these are simple tips that people can start doing if they are not doing at the moment. I mentioned as well the smart meters. Smart meters is the new generation of gas and electric meters. Has been rolled out across Great Britain in the last couple of years. Are completely free, and people can request one of these to the energy supplier. When you request a smart meters, you receive the in-home display, and this is what is very important because it's what will help residents to be on top of the energy bills. So people can see in real time how much money they are expending in pounds and pence. Some of the benefits of the smart meters is that with this in-home display, we will learn how much money we use, for example, if we are ironing or if we use a kettle or if you put the dishwasher. So we will learn how efficient and how much money we are using, and will help you in the future to save money and energy. And the other things is that we'll send direct meter readers to the companies, to the energy suppliers. So this means that people will pay accurate bills and not estimated bills, and this is very important. The government say that by installing the smart meters, that will be beneficial for the environment in the future as well. Because installing smart meters can help to reduce the energy that we are waste, and can cut down these wastes. And the government estimate that the smart meter rollout could eventually save 650 million pounds of energy waste in the system. Chris spoke a little bit as well about energy efficiency or inefficiency in the house. And I know, again, like Chris mentioned, in the pen of the house or the flat where you live, this percentage will vary a little bit, but in general, we lose a lot of energy if the house is not properly insulated. So around 25% for the roof, windows, and doors, 15% for the floors, and 35% for the walls. So this is very important that we take this into considerations when we are starting to save energy and reduce the emissions. The APC, as well Chris mentioned, the Energy Performance Certificate, is very important that all the residents start to be more familiar with this. By law at the moment, when people is renting a flat, they need to see the EPC before that. And if the house is rated in the last two F of G, shouldn't be able somebody to live in that house because it's very risk to the health. In terms of install small energy measures in your home, things that you can think about that are usually not very expensive is to put some draft-proof indoors and windows. As I mentioned before, have LED bulbs instead of the regular all light bulbs. Have radiator panels as well, most in the radiators who are facing outside walls, and apply energy saving measures, like for example, be sure that the shower head is working properly. And so as I mentioned at the beginning, we provide free energy advice to residents. At the moment, we have a hybrid service. So we do telephone consultations and home visits. The home visits are always better because it's more in-depth support. So to access to our free support, the household need to meet one of these criteria. So we help everybody who is fuel poor, so who is spending so much money in the energy bills, or in low income, so earning 15,900 or less, or in receipt of any means of tested benefits. And or, because sometimes there are two criteria, with a long-term health condition, people with disability, people who is 65 and over, and household with children under the age of 5. What advice we give to residents, what support we give to residents? Well, we give personalized advice on the energy bills. Usually switching providers or switching a tariff was the best option to save money at that moment, because of the actual energy crisis. Is not always the best option. So we see the options in the one-to-one basis with the residents. We share as well personalized tips on how to save energy in the house. And we help residents to navigate what kind of discounts they are entitled to that maybe they don't know, like will be, for example, the warm home discount, that is one-off payment, the electricity bills, or water discounts, depends, again, of the resident circumstances. We help as well residents to apply for the free priority service register. That is an extra support that all the energy supplier has to vulnerable residents. We as well, if the resident is interested in explain about smart meters, and we can help to request one to the suppliers. We support residents that has debt with gas, electricity, and water. Could be, like applying for a grant for rights of the debt, or talking with the energy supplier on their behalf to try to find a better way to pay the debt. We help as well to apply for larger grants if people need to replace the boiler or have insulations. So we can, help to tell residents what the scheme are available and how they can start applying for that support. We give free energy, small energy measures that I will show in a little bit. So we deliver in by post if the consultation is over the phone, and we install for free. The Green Doctors will install for free during the consultation. Is a face-to-face. And like I mentioned at the beginning, we have a holistic approach, and we try to help residents to better the well-being. So if there is something this close to us, like, I don't know, people has problem with the benefits, or they feeling isolated and they like to, be connected with some organization who do a befriending activity. If the resident wants, we signpost residents to other organizations within the board. This is some of our energy saving measures that as well we install for free, like draft excluder, radiator panels, shower heads, save a flash that is to use in the toilet. So, and this is a way that people can start saving energy straight away. To refer a resident or to refer yourself, if you think you meet the eligibility criteria, you can go to our website. There is a form that is very easy to complete. It takes less than 2 minutes. We have a free telephone number as well, Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, and we have our email address. If the people have access to internet, we always recommend to refer or to go to our website, because it's the quickest way to make a referral. This is our referral form that can be translated as well in different languages. And it is important that we can do the telephone consultation, or the home visit will be with the translator over the phone, with translators in any other language. We cover some of the languages within our team, but if not, we work with an organization that they can have a translator. That this is very, very important as well. Just to sum up, I like to share a story for one resident that we helped, 54 years old, that is unemployed due to a disability. This was back when switching supplier was a good option to save money. So the Green Doctor helped the resident to switch supplier to save around £290 a year, plus help her to apply for a water discount, so 50% in the bill in the monthly basis that the resident wasn't aware that she was entitled to. And as well, the resident has some debt with one of the suppliers, so we apply for a assist funds to write off the debt. You will have, again, all my information and my email if you like to contact me, and you can follow up as well in social media and Twitter and Facebook. And if there are here today or organization or community group that you think that the people that you support will benefit from our service, please do get in touch, because we can organize as well online or face-to-face community talks or training session for your team. Okay, thank you, and it's everything for me, Hakeem.
Thank you very, very much, Carolina. Carolina talked to us briefly about problems associated with field poverty, and some really practical things we can do in our own homes, not only to reduce money, but also not only to save money, but also to reduce carbon emissions. And finally, how Green Doctors can support us, particularly if we meet the criteria highlighted. So we'll be happy to share the email address and the web address later, so that people can make referrals as appropriate. Thank you very much once again, Carolina. Okay, so we're now going to a colleague, Cenk, to talk to us about Brent's CO2 Go. Is Cenk available? Have you been able to sort out your Zoom?
I'm afraid not, no, but I believe Catherine should be able to help.
Okay, cool. Catherine, if you introduce yourself, please.
I was just wondering whether I needed to call myself Cenk.
Thank you, Catherine.
I'm Catherine Rotsky. I'm Energy and Sustainability Manager at Brent. And as Catherine Southwood said, we've launched a really exciting scheme called CO2 to Go. We'll put the link in the chat. We've allocated £500,000 from our carbon offset fund, which is money collected from developers who haven't been able to meet a zero carbon target on site. And we've allocated it to participatory budgeting. And we've allocated £400,000 to groups of properties, so clusters of properties, both houses and flats. So get together with your neighbours and apply for the fund. Basically, you apply and we'll organise for someone to come and do a survey on all of the properties and come up with a plan to spend the money within your groups with consultation with the residents. I'll hand back to Hakeem.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we're now going to go back, to our speakers, and our next speaker is Josie Yvette, who is from Ecover.
Hi, I'm just going to try and share my screen. Bear with me a moment. There we go. I hope that's working for everybody.
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Lovely. So apologies that I'm going to look slightly off to the side so that I can see my own slides. I've got myself set up with 2 screens here and hadn't realized that was how it would look. So I am here to talk to you about Ecoverb. Ecoverb, I hope this is going to be quite a quick and simple presentation, because the aim of Ecoverb really is to make it easy for people to retrofit their homes. So I'll give you a little bit of a talk about how we came about. Bear with me. Sorry, I'm having trouble moving my own slides. I don't know why I've got a different setup to normal. It's probably because I'm not used to Zoom. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Right, next slide. Lovely. Okay, so what is Ecoverb? Ecoverb is a it's a partnership between 2 organisations, Parity Projects, Chris spoke earlier, and Retrofit Works. So Parity Projects holds information about houses in London and all over the country, and we provide software that can help you to plan an effective retrofit, a retrofit that's going to work, that means that you get the benefits that you should get from it, and you actually save energy and save money and save carbon. So Retrofit Works is a cooperative of contractors. They vet all the contractors before they become members to make sure that they're quality contractors that can be relied on. But also a cooperative of retrofit professionals such as architects and retrofit coordinators, and what we call advocates, who are community groups and other people who want to make sure that a retrofit is happening. So that's a not-for-profit cooperative, and together with Parity Projects, we've come together to create a service called Ecoverb. This was born out of a government-funded pilot project. Essentially, there were a number of aims to that pilot project, but really the essential one was how to make it easier for people to work out how to retrofit their homes, what were the barriers, and how can we overcome them. So Parity Projects had actually been helping homeowners directly before that, but we were very interested in working on this pilot project because we wanted to look at how to join up with the supply chain to sort of give people that end-to-end, the access to an end-to-end service if they want it. So these 2 people, JP and Gabby, they were customers of Parity Projects before Ecoverb was set up. So they got advice only. So they got advice about how to do up their home from us. As you can see, this is a fairly large retrofit. Not everybody does all of this all at once, but they went for quite a number of measures together, and they got the advice from Parity Projects that showed them which measures would work for the house and how much they'd save and how to plan that. They had, it was a really good news story in the end. They were really pleased with their retrofit, but they had a little bit of a mixed experience. And this is one of the reasons why we knew that Ecoverb was really needed, basically. So I do apologize if are you seeing all my Zoom toolbars over the top of my slides, by the way, or is that just me?
No, it's only.
Okay, fantastic, good. So very odd, it's looking different than normal, but there we are. So yes, they basically they were really pleased with their retrofit in the end. You can see here how they were in love with how little they need to heat the house. They still pinch themselves. They didn't know that there were people that could crunch numbers for you and show you what would actually work for your particular house. And they credit the fact that they live in a really warm house, which they actually said they don't really switch the heating on ever, is because of the work that we did for them. But they had a real bit of a problem getting there. They had some difficult times with their contractors. We weren't meant to be holding their hands throughout this project, but actually that last comment at the bottom there, it says a couple of people made it bearable and one of them was Russell, was because they were having problems with their installation at the time. We actually stuck around and sort of gave the advice that was needed, and that really demonstrated how much a service like this can be really useful, to have someone around to sort of help you navigate the bits and pieces when you're doing a bigger retrofit like they were. So we've created Ecoverb, which is an end-to-end service. You can pick parts of it, but essentially it takes, there's sort of 3 stages really. One is finding out what suits your home, exploring. One is getting the details, making it real, so having a contract with your builders and knowing what you want to do. And the third is making it happen, so actually having the installation done. So the first step that you could go and do straight after today, if you wanted to, is to look up your house on Ecoverb. We've got what we call a plan builder, and that's where you can put in the address for your actual home. You can see there, I've just blanked it out, but there's an address on there. This is looking at somebody's particular house, and you can say how much you would be wanting to spend. You can see on this particular slide, someone's put up to 10,000, and you can choose whether you want to save money on your bills or you want to save carbon mainly, or a mixture of the two. That will give you personalized recommendations for your home. Particularly if you are using this tool, it's a really good idea to go into the home information area and update. The data on a lot of homes is very good. Some homes we don't have completely up-to-date information, and so it's a very good idea to go into the home information area, update the information about your home, and then you'll get even more accurate recommendations. You can see that it gives you some pricing, and that's not a quotation, that is just an indication of how much it might cost you. And you can see that it also gives you a estimation of how much carbon you're going to save. So this is a free tool. This is just an information tool. It's out there for people to have a look, see what the options are, maybe find out about bits of sort of measures and things that you can do to your home that you hadn't really thought of that might be really beneficial. So that's the first step. If you then want to go on and have that, so that's sort of the free version. If you want to go on and have somebody come out and actually do that for you, so they come in, they measure up your home, they check everything in person, talk to you, they can come out, you can book that with us, and we come out and do that and send you what's called an Ecoverb plan. This is just one page out of many that shows you a little bit about the sort of information you end up with when you've got your Ecoverb plan. You can see here that we phased this project after talking to the person who had this plan done. You know, they weren't able to afford everything at once, or maybe you don't want to do everything at once because it's a disruption, so you want to phase it over time. So we would plan that out with you into phases, and it shows you how much you know, you will be saving over time. So by that stage, you've already you've got all the information. That's the explore stage. You've got the information. It tells you what's suitable for your home, and you could do that as a standalone service, particularly if you're deciding in the end to do one or two measures, maybe simpler measures. Maybe you already know some contractors that you trust, and you're kind of happy to go ahead in that way. You can certainly use the service just to get a plan, or you could go on and have the next step, which is useful for finding contractors, which is having a building performance requirements document done. So that's really it becomes useful when you're doing multiple measures, like the people I showed you at first. You want to see how they all interact together, and you want to be able to take that to contractors to get an accurate quotation for the work, for the right work, and covering all the important aspects of it. So you can use that document yourself to then go off and look for contractors yourself, but with the knowledge that you need. So then if you get a one-line quote back, you know that actually, oh, well, what about this, where this bit's meant to sort of join with that bit or something. You could use it yourself, or you can ask us to go ahead and look for quotations for you through the cooperative that I mentioned earlier. So with that would mean getting quotes from people who've been pre-vetted and showing them to you. When you are happy with that, go ahead to contract stage, get everything confirmed. Throughout the installation, you would have meetings with your coordinator to make sure that the work was happening in the right way. And at the end, your coordinator checks, signs off the work, and then you make the payment or a final payment if it's been a larger job. So that's the sort of end-to-end service, but you can choose the bits that are relevant for you in your situation. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what's happening in London at the moment. So we're a relatively new service, Ecoverb, and you can see that these are the clients that we have at the moment across London. I'm hoping that after this, the number in Brent is going to start going up there. And we obviously sort of covering London, and this is where you can start your journey. This is our website up there, www.ecoverb.com, and if you go to the bit that says try the free plan builder, that's where you can get the use the free tool to see what might suit your home. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'll stop sharing and hand back.
Thank you very much, Josie. Are you able to stop sharing? Great. Thank you very much. So in brief, Josie shared with us how Ecover can support us to retrofit our homes and the flexibility around that. We don't have to do everything, but we can do things in phases and stages. And then introduce a tool we can all use to work out what is possible within our homes, in addition to estimating both the cost of doing them and how much carbon reduction we can achieve by doing so. So thank you very much for that, Josie, for that very useful presentation. So I can see there's a lot of questions flying in. Thank you very much for that. We'll be going to Q&A shortly. But before we do so, we have our last speaker, Alan Burden, who is from Eco Design Consultants. Alan is a chartered architect, a certified European Passivhaus designer. Thank you very much. Alan?
Thank you, Hakeem. I'll try and keep it quick because I'm sure people like to get on with their evening. I've got quite a few slides, so I'm going to go through them quite quickly if that's okay. But there is going to be sent out later, so you can have a look at in detail later if you want to, or get in touch and ask some questions. So let me try and share the screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that now. There we go. Hopefully you can see the screen now. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today was really some of the deep retrofits. So this is probably, looking at Chris's slides earlier, this probably is the house that's not that says the A-rated one, the one single one in Brent that he showed. As a company, as Hakeem said, we're architects and we're also very involved with the environmental stuff as environmental consultants, but particularly something called Passivhaus, which is a European standard to try and help use building physics really to get to the best possible energy efficiency rating. We've done a number of new builds, retrofits, including the house in Brent here in Kensal Green, which is actually, it went to the full Passivhaus, not just the retrofit standard, but to the full Passivhaus standard. So just quickly talking about that project, the client on that project was a lovely guy called Peter Land. He was a very enthusiastic climate scientist. He knew all the things we've been talking about earlier, that housing was really a big part of the need to reduce carbon, and we needed to do something about it now. This was the house he had, so fairly run down. He was looking to sell it. He'd had the property for quite some time. He'd actually moved away and was renting it out, but he wanted to sell the property, and he wanted to use some of the profit he'd made really just through the investment and the rising property prices to really show what could be done to a Victorian house in terms of reducing its carbon footprint. So this is some of the inside. You can see some of the mold and stuff around the bathrooms. So I'm hoping people listening here, your houses aren't quite as bad as this, but they may well be. So just very quickly, I wanted to go through some of the basic building physics of the Passivhaus standard, and this is kind of appropriate for all houses and all buildings, new builds and existing. So looking at it in a new build sense, so this bar chart down the side is really how many kilowatt hours it would take to heat a new build house. So existing house, I think the house we were looking at earlier was probably around 200 300 kilowatts per square meter per year. So this is the number of kilowatt hours to heat it to 20 degrees per meter squared per year. So the first thing we look at is your insulation. So I think we've talked about insulation already. So lots of insulation around the house. So that's loft insulation and wall insulation and floor insulation. The next thing, which is I think really important, is often not looked at, is the efficient shape. So basically it's the surface area of the building that's losing heat. So if you're in a mid terrace, ideally you're losing a lot less heat because there's less space to lose heat. There's no side in a semi-detached, your side wall will be losing heat as well as everything else. The third item here in terms of improvements is going to triple glazing. This helps not only reduce your heat gains, it also helps a little bit in reducing potential overheating in summer. It's also very good at making sure that the house is very comfortable. It means no cold drafts are moving from the cold glass into the room. And the other really important one, you can see it drops down a lot here, is your drafts and your air tightness. So getting that down to a low level can really, really help reduce your fuel bills. And potentially, if combined with a good ventilation system, can really improve the air quality within the house and help in terms of humidity and other things. And the number 6 here is the thermal bridges. This is making sure that when the details are done, they're done well, and you're not getting cold spots left, which could be from steel or concrete, which transfers heat from the inside to the outside, and leaving areas that are cold that could potentially then cause condensation and other risks. So you're really looking at those details. And you do all that, you get really good levels of comfort. So all surface temperatures are within 4 degrees of room temperature, so there's no air movement from cold to warm. And it's really nice and comfortable. And a few other bits and pieces that Passivhaus does to make sure you don't waste your energy elsewhere. So taking those principles, we want to take it to Peter's house. So this was his existing house. So existing usage was around 287 kilowatts per meter square per year. So that was broken down into the various areas. So you can see a lot of heat was being lost through those front walls, a solid brick wall at the front, a lot through drafts and ventilation, and then floors and windows and roofs. So what we did to start with, we did some analysis and we got it down to 25, the Passivhaus Retrofit standard. In fact, he then came back to us and said, can we go further? And we did a few little bits and pieces to go even further, and we got down to 15 kilowatts, and it's a certified Passivhaus. So what we did, all that, this is the finished house. So it became a certified Passivhaus, increased some space. We did a loft conversion of things, and he managed to sell the house and come away with a bit of a profit. So one of the things I really wanted to talk to do today was about really developing a whole house plan. Some of the other speakers today were also talking about this kind of process. So really, if you can get a plan for your house together and you can work at it in stages, that's much better than trying to do little bits that you then may decide that isn't quite what you want and you haven't done enough. You can just go back and do stuff later. So really try and do all this as good as you can each step, each time, and make sure you've got a long-term plan for the house. So that going through those points again, that's what we did. So we did lots of analysis. So this is some of the graphs analysis. I won't go into that detail at the moment. But the first principle was the efficient shape. Here's an example of looking at a mid-floor flat and a bungalow. If you look at the heat loss area, so that's the pink area here, that's the area losing heat. So if you're in a mid-floor flat, you're lucky. And on this one, 74 meters squared of heat loss area. If you're living in a bungalow, however, same layout, same design, everything else, you have 279 meters squared of heat loss area. So much, much more. And what that translates to, so if the mid-floor apartment, around about 2,000 kilowatts a year to heat, the bungalow, exactly the same in every other respect, about 4,500 kilowatts to heat. That's both to current building regulations. On Peter's house, one of the things we did was he had, you can see here, this is the existing front door. They're slightly recessed. We moved the front door out. Now you think, okay, that's not going to make much difference. But it did. It made 12% savings in heat loss because of reducing that area that was losing heat. So no longer losing heat through that sidewall or through the floor into the bathroom above. One of the reasons why that bathroom above was so cold and damp. So moving a door forward. So there might be little things like that you can do that could make a big difference in terms of the performance of your house. The second thing was the draft free, reducing the ventilation losses. So here is a quick graph showing what we had done in the final house. If we'd have said that the air change rate was 10, which is kind of building regulations, that's kind of the size of a ATM, a hole that size, which is what's allowable within building regulations. So that would have then had used 65 kilowatts a year to heat. What we did is we got down to 15 kilowatts and it's at 0.6. So you can see very easily that difference. So 76% savings just by getting that drafts down. So some huge savings there. So what we did to do that, there was lots of air tightness tapes, lots of membranes and making sure that the membranes and everything joins up, lots of taping. This is an air pressure test going on. So this is where we put a fan in the door and we did a test to see how airtight it was. Once you have a nice airtight building, you really want to make sure you're looking at the ventilation. So what we always would recommend is something called mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. So that takes in fresh air from the outside passes through the ventilation machine and then out into the building and provides fresh air from the outside that's pre-warmed by the stale air going out. It's the right amount, so it comes out little fans, like this is one of the fans there. And we can usually get these things, even though they are big ducts, hidden away in most properties. It probably costs you between £8,000 and £12,000 to do, but in my mind, it's well worth it in terms of the energy savings and, more importantly, the improved air quality. Other things we did was external wall insulation. So here we added lots of insulation to the front of the house. You can see some of the insulation going on there. One of the things you might also notice here, that where we put the new windows, we moved them out into the insulation zone to try and reduce some of the thermal bridging at the edges. And also, once we did that, we then put also some insulation over the frame, which is one of the weaker points in the building. Very quickly, I want to talk a little bit about internal wall insulation, which is one of the things we considered in the first place. But you have to be very careful if you're considering internal wall insulation in terms of moisture control, making sure that there's not going to be any chance of any condensation forming that could form condensation and then mold and other things. So you need to be really careful. So the first option most people would go to would be like an insulated plasterboard, which I'm kind of showing here. The problem with that is that you have to put it on battens and it's supposed to be a ventilated void behind. So you'd need to be able to get air going in. So you really need to be drilling holes in the outside of your wall to get the air to ventilate around. So there is a real risk of potential moisture and problems there. We would always recommend with a solid wall construction to have no gaps within the construction. So having insulation on the inside, but it needs to be vapor open. It needs to be what people sometimes refer to as breathable, to let that moisture in and out of the wall. So one of the options there is the wood fibre board, a very good product, and then a lime plaster on the inside. That allows you to do quite a lot of things. The other option is quite a nice new product called Diathanite, which is a cork lime render. Again, a breathable, natural insulation material that can just be pumped onto the wall and can give that sort of uneven look. And the fourth option here would be something like a mineral wool put between timber battens. So again, vapor open, not quite as well performing, but yeah, so there's some really good options there, but you are limited. Also insulating floors. So here we can see what we did to the floor. So lots of insulation on the floors. We're also insulating around the perimeters and up the skirting boards a little bit to reduce the thermal bridges. So other bits on thermal bridges, because we were insulating on the outside of Peter's house and we weren't doing the neighbour's house, we had to be careful that we weren't letting all the heat through the edges of the wall next door into Peter's property. So we had some internal insulation as well. And you can see here some of the steps that we had to do to try and reduce those thermal bridges at the edges. On the front, you can see here's where we've finished with the external wall insulation and re-added some of the features and so forth. So you really can't tell that we've done lots of insulation on the front of the house. And you can see the good triple glazed windows there. So very quickly looking at the Passivhaus benefits. Often people think of Passivhaus as being sort of very low in terms of energy, heating demands, very airtight, surface temperatures being limited so that there's no air movement and between 4 degrees, ventilation system and looking at the overheating. But what that really means is that you're going to have a property that's no condensation or mold, no external pollutants, and a system that removes any internal pollutants, which results in warm, comfortable buildings, healthy indoor air quality, and a comfortable in summer. Alternatively, you may have fuel poverty, high fuel bills, bad indoor air quality, and other sort of respiratory issues and so forth, and discomfort and so forth. So you really need to be careful on making sure what you can do. So one of the questions that often we're asked is sort of how far should we go? Because what I've just shown is a very deep retrofit. It's quite an expensive thing to do to get to that level and have almost zero fuel bills. So the question is really, do you go for deep retrofit or shallow retrofit? So a deep retrofit, you can reduce your carbon emissions, reduce renewable energy demands. The peak loads as a country are more shared. There's less storage requirements on the grid and the lower bills and so forth, and improved health, like I was saying. And heat pumps that Chris was talking about earlier become much more effective. If you do a shallow retrofit, and maybe you're looking at shallow retrofit and putting in the heat pumps early instead to reduce your carbon footprint, okay, that might help in terms of reducing your carbon emissions, but you'll have a large renewable demand, which means that the electricity demand also increases. So as a country, we have difficulty in terms of managing those peak loads, and we have more grid storage requirements. little changes. So some quite difficult things there to do. So really, I think we should be heading more for deep than retrofit. But I know a lot of people are saying, well, we can't afford to go for deep retrofit. I would agree. We can't all do that. I'm one of those people. So what I suggest we do is we look at phasing the project, and we do step at times. Because if you do for a shallow retrofit, basically you're locked in. You basically, if you put a 50 millimeters of external wall insulation, you're not going to come back, take the render off and put more on. So you are kind of locked in. If you do a deep retrofit, you can do it in steps and you can finally get it. So you might do the windows in one go, you might do the external wall insulation at another go, but you can do it in steps and you can do each step well. That's really what I'd recommend. And Passivhaus does a thing called Durofit, which is a certification system in stages. We won't go into that now. So yeah, so really what I'm saying is do everything well, think about moisture, look at ventilation and air tightness, they're really important, and just set up a plan for your whole house and get in touch. So that's, I think, a very quick tour around. So I know there's lots of questions coming in, so hopefully back to Hakeem rather.
Thank you very much, Alan. If you on-share, please.
There we go.
Great. So that was really interesting. Alan talked to us about why the right design is important to achieve, obviously, the objective we're talking about today, and that is by developing a whole house plan, and finally the benefits of achieving a Passivhaus certification. So that brings us to the end of presentations from our expert speakers. We're now going into the Q&A. So you have been submitting your questions, which have been very, very helpful. Thank you for that. If I may kick the discussion off. So could I ask that the speakers are spotlighted, please? So if I start with the question that Jack Peacock asked, because there's been a lot of talk about heat pumps. So heat pumps are great, but I'm told they're not appropriate for flats. So do you have any suggestions for those people who live in flats? Would this go to Chris or Alan?
Yeah, sure. So what did I put? I went back, for those in the chat, there's something written there, but I'm saying that I wouldn't rule out heat pumps just because it's a flat. There are lots of different ways people may be able to get a heat pump into certain types of flats, especially if it's like Victorian street conversion flats. There's lots of opportunity on flat roofs or in garden spaces and things. And over time, I think as there's a drive to try and get more heat pumps in, there'll be more solutions coming which are more appropriate to flats. But there are considerations on the positioning of them. So there may be situations at the moment where it's more tricky. There are some things on the market that can get around that in certain situations. So things called shared loop ground source heat pumps, which essentially you drill one borehole in a car park outside a block of flats, and then you have something which is the size of a shoebox and is called a shoebox in the kitchen, under a kitchen cupboard or something, and that does the heat pump bit. So all of the infrastructure, most of the infrastructure you share with everybody else outside. And then you have a radiator system inside. So that may be an option where you have a block. Or there may be opportunities, instead of going down the heat pump route, to go to communal heat pumps, similar to the shared loop, but maybe on an air source or something else. Or there may be other community heating systems or heat networks that come available over time. I think there'll be a growth in heat networks, especially for those trickier properties. Finally, if it may be that there are some residual properties where you just can't get those heat pumps in, and as the grid decarbonizes, maybe a move away from fossil fuels onto electric heating, potentially ones that are storage heaters, so they use lower rate off-peak tariffs, but in some circumstances maybe on-peak boilers, but you do a significant amount of deeper retrofit to keep the bills low. So you're not using as much.
Okay, Jeanette also asked the alternative of hydrogen. How does that fit in?
So from Parity's point of view, hydrogen, we don't see much of a golden bullet or silver bullet, even, or golden bullet, let's go even further, with hydrogen. The people we see that are pushing conversations about it the most are those who have a vested interest in continue to supply gas and gas networks. And I like to do a back of the envelope calculation. So a hydrogen boiler will be essentially similar to a gas boiler, i.e. it will be at max around 90% efficient. So for 1 unit of energy in a bit of hydrogen, you're not even going to get 1 unit of heat out. But you've got to make that hydrogen first of all. And if you're going all the way to making it from renewable energy, there's going to be losses in using whatever you're getting from your turbines and your net zero electricity, converting water into hydrogen. So you're going to have much greater losses than just the 10% in the boiler. So let's say you're down to about 70% or something. So for 1 unit of renewable energy, you're getting 3/4 of a unit of heat. If you were to put in a heat pump for 1 unit of renewable energy, you may get 3 to 4 times the amount of heat. So where we're already trying to get more and more renewables, if we're suddenly going to have to get 4 times as many to get to net zero, it seems like the wrong choice. There is a place, we think, for hydrogen in a low carbon future, but mainly in industrial situations where electricity isn't required, maybe in transport. So let's use it for that rather than trying to use it in houses where possible.
Thank you for that, Chris. Alan, Josie, anything you want to add to what Chris has said?
I think Chris said it all, really. Yeah, I totally agree.
Okay. Now, I mean, we've got 12 minutes to go. Obviously, we won't be able to go through all of the questions at this time, but you have to recognize that there's a lot of information that's been shared today by yourselves. Lots of technical words used, lots of things that people are trying to grapple with. So, in the most simple sense, from each of you, if I ask you to please share no more than 2 key things that people can take away with them today that they will remember forever, where possible that they can go home and either do immediately or start considering to do in their own homes. Just 2 from each. I'll start with Carolina, if I may.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think some of the tips that I share, I think, as I mentioned, either if we are able to pay high gas bills and we are able to overfill our kettle with water when we put the kettle or things like that, we need to start doing these small things. I mean, the other presenters that will talk about but maybe other ways to save more energy and lower the emissions, but I think we need to be very conscious in the daily basis how we can save energy. So things every time that you are using the kettle and try to go around your home, see your light bulbs that you are using, all these kind of things. Yes, just to quick.
Thank you, Carolina. Alan?
I would say make a plan, because I think most of us will look to do some refurb or some changes within your property at some point. If you're painting getting a new boiler fitted, use that as an opportunity to know if you're, I mean, this is a Parity project quote, I think, from a long time back, Chris. If you're changing the boiler, now's the time to put some insulation behind it. If you're going to be doing internal insulation, put it in before you put the boiler back in. Take those opportunities. Think of a long-term plan for the house. The other thing would be draft proofing, reducing those drafts down, but making sure that you still have adequate ventilation to breathe through. So opening windows of trickle vents and those sort of things. There would be my biggest thing. But plan and can I add another one? Is that allowed?
Yes.
I mean, the other one that I'm always talking about is the shape of a building. So reducing the surface area that's losing heat. So things like moving that front door forward. If you've got a recessed front door, put a new front door, nice new triple glazed one right out on the surface of the building. Those sort of little things can make a big difference. Plus you get a bit more space.
Thank you very much. Josie? You're muted, I'm afraid.
Yep, sorry. So yes, Alan stole the one that I was
I'm sorry.
So I'll have one of your three and just reinforce. I think get a plan, get the whole house plan. We call it an Ecover plan, but yeah, have that plan done in your house so that you've got the big picture about what would work for your house and what order to do it in.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Chris.
I'm not going to come up with too much that's radical at this stage. Whilst you're waiting to implement your plan over time, Alan picked up a good one on the draft briefing. If there is a way that you can restrict the amount of your house that you are heating. So if you have a house that a lot of people have quite small properties, so this won't be relevant. But if your house is larger and you're not using all areas of it, amending your heating system, either with thermostatic radiator valves or even better controllable ones, such that you can reduce the overall internal volume. It does much of what Alan was saying about reducing the surface area. The more you can sort of not heat at certain times, the better. So that'll help you save a bit of money so you can start implementing your longer term plan, your Ecover plan.
Thank you all. Thank you all very, very much. I want to thank you on behalf of Brent and on behalf of all the participants today for the very, very useful information that you have shared. Now, just to wrap up, the things that I think are important to take away from today. One, very practical things around your home, the actions that you take. Think about when you boil that kettle. We've heard a lot about that, not only today, but if you want to make one cup of tea, boil enough water for 1 cup of tea. Change your light bulbs, and then if you're planning any refurb in your home, seize that opportunity. Any work you're doing, seize the opportunity to think about how that particular work or what other things you can do around it that would either save energy or save you money. And following what we've done today, we will be happy to take questions from anyone when we circulate the information. As a local authority, where we want to be there to support people to achieve a reduction in carbon emissions, not only in individual homes but generally across the borough. Okay, Tom, is there anything you want to say to round us off?
Hello, Hakeem. Perhaps I'm Cenk from Brent Council. Perhaps I could just quickly say that the CO2 applications are currently live. So the presentations that you've seen today from Ecover that offer suggestions about how you can make improvements to your homes to reduce carbon. Those are some potential ideas that you could receive funding for in your home on the CO2 to go through the CO2 to go grant. So please go on to the Brent Council website under You Decide. So it's www.brent.gov.uk/You Decide, where you'll see the link to the grant, and the applications are live and they close on the 8th of January. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Cenk. So folks, you can't get better. You've heard exactly what you can do in your homes, and now you can apply for a grant to do precisely that. I mean, what more can you ask for? So thank you all very much for attending, sparing your time to come to this seminar. And once again, thank you very much to the speakers. Thank you, Councillor Chef and colleagues for putting all the effort in to make this happen. So thank you all, and good evening.
Thank you, Hakeem, and great sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Everybody. Bye-bye.